Imagine for a moment that you built an empire. It could be an empire of land, of trade, of knowledge, or of investments. You spent decades cultivating it, expanding it, protecting it, and above all, accumulating not just wealth, but influence. Now imagine this. What will happen to all of it when you are no longer here? This is a question the ultra-rich never leave to chance. While most people avoid the subject of succession, out of fear, discomfort, or even superstition, the truly wealthy and powerful have always understood that planning for the future beyond their own lifetime is the key to ensuring that a legacy does not vanish like dust in the wind. Today, we are going to explore how the ultra-rich deal with succession planning, and to do that, we will travel through the history of humanity. You will see that from the pharaohs of Egypt to the tech magnates of Silicon Valley, there is an invisible thread: the pursuit of eternity through the preservation of wealth and control over future generations. If we travel back thousands of years, to ancient Egypt, we see that the pharaohs were obsessed with continuity. They believed that even after death, their identity could cross centuries. But it was not enough to build giant pyramids to guard their bodies. They also structured the future of their empire. The pharaoh was not thinking only of material riches, but of how to perpetuate his lineage, his lands, and his spiritual authority. What do we learn from this? That succession planning is not just financial. It is cultural, strategic, and deeply psychological. Pharaohs created rules, marital alliances, and legal frameworks to ensure that their children and descendants not only inherited their wealth, but also their worldview. They understood that wealth without direction dissolves. Centuries later, in the Roman Empire, inheritance was already formally established in law. The Roman will was seen not only as a document, but as a weapon of power. Emperors and senators used wills to manipulate heirs, favor political allies, and even redefine the order of power in Rome. The curious detail? Romans understood that leaving a will was also a psychological act of control, because even in death, you still dictated the rules. And what do today's ultra-rich do, if not exactly that? With trusts, foundations, and complex legal structures, they continue deciding the fate of their wealth long after they are gone. In the Middle Ages, succession became a matter of survival. European kingdoms were constantly threatened by wars and internal disputes. What guaranteed stability? Clear succession. A king who did not define well who would inherit the throne opened the door to civil wars, assassinations, and territorial fragmentation. Think of the chaos of the Wars of the Roses in England, caused largely by unresolved inheritance disputes. The nobles learned from these mistakes and began to create clever strategies: arranged marriages, secret wills, and international alliances. It was not just about dividing land or chests of gold, it was about protecting entire dynasties. Here we see a pattern. The wealthy and powerful do not see succession planning as a bureaucratic task. To them, it is a long-term power strategy, capable of crossing generations. Now compare this with the modern world. Today, billionaire families like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and even the heirs of technological empires follow the same logic. It is not just about leaving money to the children. It is about ensuring that the family's philosophy, its vision, and even its political influence remain intact. With the rise of capitalism in the 19th century, succession planning gained new tools. The Industrial Revolution generated immense fortunes in a short time, and with them came new challenges: how to protect wealth against taxes, wars, bankruptcies, and poor management. This is when the first modern instruments still used by the ultra-rich appeared: the trust and the foundation. They allowed wealth to be managed professionally and stably, preventing fortunes from simply being wasted by inexperienced heirs. Andrew Carnegie and many other magnates donated part of their fortunes before dying or invested in their own foundations. Andrew Carnegie was not an exclusively virtuous man, nor were many of the men I have mentioned here. Carnegie built his immense fortune in the steel industry by exploiting workers in dangerous conditions, faced violently suppressed strikes, and prioritized profit over the safety and well-being of his employees. However, later in life, he donated a portion of his wealth. And we know that many of these contributions often serve as tools to cleanse reputations, rather than stemming from genuine altruistic motivation. And here lies another crucial point. The ultra-rich do not think only about who will inherit. but about how the inheritance will be used to shape the future. At this point, you may already notice the pattern. Pharaohs, emperors, kings, nobles, and industrial magnates all had something in common. They did not let fate decide. They created mechanisms of control. The ultra-rich today follow exactly the same mentality. Only now, instead of swords and arranged marriages, they use legal tools, global financial consultancies, and sophisticated tax strategies. But there is one detail that many people miss. For the ultra-rich, succession planning is not just about money. It is about psychological power, identity, and eternal legacy. And here, I want to ask you a provocative question. If you were to leave tomorrow, would your inheritance, whether small or large, represent who you really are? Or would it be lost in chaos, leaving disputes and emptiness behind you? If this topic is already making you reflect and opening your eyes to how the ultra-rich think differently, I want to ask you one quick thing. Subscribe now to Investor School. Here, we explore what the smartest and most powerful investors in the world know, and how you can apply those principles in your own life. With each video, you take one more step toward transforming not only your finances, but your mindset as well. Now we arrive in the modern age, where succession planning takes an even more fascinating form. Today, it no longer limits itself to the physical world. Think of giants of technology like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Mark Zuckerberg. They are not just planning who will inherit their fortunes. They are thinking about how to perpetuate their ideas, their companies, and even their futuristic visions for humanity. Private foundations, dynastic trusts, international tax planning, all of these are part of an invisible arsenal that ensures that empires continue to grow even when the founder is no longer here. But there is something even deeper. The ultra-rich are, in fact, buying time. When they invest in biotechnology, cryopreservation, and longevity research, they are not only trying to prolong life, but also control over their legacy. What does this show us? That for those who already have power and money in abundance, the true obsession is not accumulation, it is perpetuity. And so today, we have seen how succession planning has accompanied humanity from ancient civilizations to modern empires. We discovered that pharaohs, kings, magnates, and billionaires all share one thing. They do not accept that fate decides what happens to their empires. They plan, they control, they leave a legacy. And this is only the first part of our journey. In the next episode, we will dive into how the ultra-rich actually structure their succession mechanisms today, with real examples, and strategies that seem invisible to the common public, but that are decisive in keeping fortunes untouched for generations. If you remember the first part, we traced a single thread from pharaohs to modern billionaires, the refusal to leave the fate of an empire to chance. In the second part, we go inside the invisible machinery the ultra-wealthy actually build. We will look at the legal engines, the human systems, and the cultural rituals that transform a fortune into a multi-generation force. This is not a checklist for loopholes. It is a study of design, how power, psychology, and structure meet to create continuity. I will describe the main mechanisms they use, the reasons behind them, and the trade-offs every owner faces when moving from accumulation to succession. One of the most powerful and common tools is the trust. Trusts come in many shapes, but their essence is simple. They separate legal ownership from beneficial use. That separation gives families the ability to control timing, purpose, and the governance of assets long after the founder is gone. A trust can be structured to protect assets from creditors, to limit the direct control of trustee beneficiaries, to prevent impulsive sales, and to create incentive frameworks, for example, paying for education, entrepreneurship, or charitable activity rather than providing unstructured cash at age 21. Dynasty trusts take this further. They are designed to last for multiple generations, sometimes in jurisdictions that allow protection from certain taxes and creditor claims for extraordinarily long periods. The ultra-rich don't use trusts merely to hide wealth. They use them to embed values, set behavioral incentives, and ensure that a mission survives structural shocks like divorce, bankruptcy, or political change. Alongside trusts, private foundations and family endowments play a distinct role. A foundation is both a tool of social influence and a practical mechanism for perpetuity. Wealth put into a foundation can fund causes that align with family values, maintain public legacy, and create a steady, tax-efficient channel for giving. But foundations do something else that is often overlooked. They create a shared family project. When heirs gather annually to decide grant priorities, they are practicing governance, learning negotiation, and internalizing a public purpose. For many dynasties, philanthropy is the glue that binds members across generations and the public armor that protects reputation when markets turn. Family offices are the operational heart that turns strategy into execution. A single family office centralizes investment management, tax planning, legal coordination, lifestyle services, and sometimes even education and recruitment for family businesses. A multifamily office provides similar services at scale for several families. The family office becomes the memory of the family, the repository of institutional knowledge, the executor of the trust's mandates, and the first line of defense against mistakes. Through family offices, the ultra-rich professionalize stewardship. Investment committees, risk frameworks, due diligence protocols, family dashboards, and succession timetables become daily practice rather than occasional conversation. Control can be separated from wealth. The ultra-rich often use corporate structures to bifurcate voting power and economic interest. Dual-class share structures, voting trusts, holding companies, and voting agreements let founders keep decision authority while distributing economic risk. This separation allows the business to be run with continuity, even as ownership fragments. In parallel, buy-sell agreements and shareholder pacts set the rules for what happens when an owner dies, divorces, or wants out, preventing chaotic auctions of control that can destroy value overnight. Insurance, liquidity planning, and contingency funding are pragmatic but decisive. When the founder dies, taxes and cash needs can create forced sales of assets at exactly the worst possible time. Life insurance, pre-positioned liquidity pools, and credit facilities secured by the family office are ways to provide the immediate cash necessary to honor obligations without dismantling the core business. The art is in sizing these instruments conservatively and aligning them with likely stress scenarios, estate taxes, legal claims, or sudden market dislocations. Prepared liquidity converts a potentially traumatic crisis into a managed transition. How assets are distributed matters as much as how they are held. The ultra-rich design payouts to encourage responsibility, stage distributions tied to milestones, matching provisions for entrepreneurship or public service, and education-first clauses that fund training before cash. Spendthrift clauses prevent reckless creditors or spouses from capturing distributions. Some trusts include trust protectors or flexible clauses to adapt to future tax law changes or unforeseen circumstances. The ethical tension is constant. Too strict, and heirs feel trapped and resentful. Too loose, and wealth dissipates. The families that succeed find a balance between control and autonomy, rules that shape behavior without crushing agency. Governance frameworks are what convert legal instruments into living systems. A family constitution, or family charter, codifies mission, roles, conflict resolution procedures, and expectations for participation. Family councils meet regularly to educate, review investments, approve major transactions, and mediate disputes. Some dynasties create advisory boards with independent experts to bring outside discipline and reduce nepotism. Clear succession ladders for leadership, whether for the family business, the family office, or the foundation, make choices predictable and less emotional. The discipline of governance converts family values into repeatable processes that can be taught and audited. Privacy and reputational management are continual preoccupations. Public visibility invites litigation, political pressure, or opportunistic business moves. Ultra-wealthy families often adopt layered ownership, holding companies, trusts in privacy-protecting jurisdictions, nominee arrangements, not to evade law, but to reduce friction and personal exposure. At the same time, controlled public engagement through philanthropy, museums, and thought leadership allows them to shape the narrative. Reputation is an asset. Protecting it is as important as protecting a balance sheet because it affects the family's ability to influence, partner, and transact. International planning is standard at scale. Families with global assets consider jurisdictional arbitrage for legal stability, tax neutrality, and longevity provisions. That might mean establishing trusts in long-standing trust jurisdictions, using holding companies in alignment with tax treaties, or relocating operational entities to stable regulatory environments. This is not a guide to avoidance. It is an acknowledgement that law is a tool to be used thoughtfully. The risk is geopolitical change, and the countermeasure is flexibility. Mechanisms that can adapt, trustees who can act across borders, and contingency plans for enforced repatriation or rapid currency events. A critical human strategy is intentional heir preparation. The ultra-wealthy often invest heavily in the socialization and training of heirs. Tailored education programs, apprenticeships within the family business, internships in professional management, and exposure to governance boards at an early age. They create accountability experiences, responsibility for real projects and budgets, rather than symbolic titles. Emotional intelligence training and family therapy are increasingly common because inherited wealth carries relational hazards, entitlement, addiction, and fractured identity. Preparing heirs psychologically reduces the chance that the second or third generation will blow apart what the founder built. Technology and longevity investments are a newer frontier of succession thinking. Many wealthy families allocate capital to extend the window of stewardship. Longevity research, biotech ventures, and health systems that increase healthy lifespan. Beyond personal motives, these investments are a hedge on continuity. More time buys more options. At the same time, cryptographic tools, secure communications, and digital wills are modernized components of continuity planning. Digital assets require explicit strategies. Who holds keys? How are passphrases passed? What is the fallback if a keyholder dies? The technical is now inseparable from the legal. What does success look like? It is not simply a bank balance that grows. It is a living institution that continues to serve a family's mission, provides purposeful roles for heirs, maintains operational excellence, and preserves optionality for future generations. The families who thrive treat wealth as a responsibility, to steward capital, to catalyze social contribution, and to train successors who can innovate rather than merely inherit. A brief note in the middle of this story: if this resonates, subscribe to Investor School now. Each episode unpacks a layer of what the most effective stewards of capital do differently, and every subscriber gets one more tool to think like a builder across generations. There are real pitfalls. Over-engineering creates brittle systems that fail under stress or breed resentment. Excess secrecy can erode trust inside the family. Heavy-handed controls can retard initiative and leave the business leaderless when the founder leaves. Poor governance invites litigation. Poor education invites waste. The antidote is iterative design. Test governance, adapt charters, rotate trustees, and use independent audits. Think of succession architecture as a living experiment that needs measurement, revision, and honest feedback. Finally, there is the moral dimension. With great control comes great responsibility. The ultra-rich who last generations do not simply transfer wealth, they transfer meaning. They create rituals, public commitments, and accountability structures that turn money into a vehicle for influence that the family considers honorable. That ethical scaffold helps prevent the corrosive effects of unmoored power. It shifts the question from, how do we keep everything, to, what do we want this capital to do in the world, for our family and for others? We have now moved from history to the workshop. Trusts, foundations, family offices, governance, liquidity planning, privacy, international design, heir education, and the new frontier of longevity and digital continuity. These are the levers the ultra-wealthy pull to translate life's work into an enduring project. In the next installment, we will draft a practical blueprint, a model family charter, a sample cascade of trusts and governance steps, and a checklist of the first 12 things any owner must do this year to convert risk into resilient continuity. If you want that blueprint and the ready-to-adapt documents that follow, tell me to prepare Part 3, and I will create the full, editable templates you can use as a starting point. In the end, the succession planning of the ultra-wealthy is not merely a financial mechanism but a mirror of the human condition. It shows us that, in the face of mortality, every person seeks a way to remain alive beyond their years, through wealth, through ideas, through stories, or through legacies carved into time itself. From the pyramids of the pharaohs to today's global foundations, the impulse remains the same: to turn finitude into continuity. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson history whispers to us, that true power is not found in accumulation, but in perpetuation.